evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Jennifer Lezak, Coordinator of Special Projects with the Adult Services Department. And on behalf of everyone at the Chicago Public Library, welcome. We are so pleased to welcome Margo Jefferson to the stage tonight as part of our new Voices for Justice speaker series. Margo will be in conversation with Booklist editor Donna Seaman. During the program, we invite you to leave your questions, comments, and reflections in the chat, and we'll ask some questions during the Q&A at the end of the conversation. Now it is my great pleasure to introduce Candace Moore, Chief Equity Officer of the City of Chicago, to introduce tonight's guests. Welcome, Candace.
Thanks, Jennifer. Hello, everyone. I'm Candace Moore, and I serve as the City of Chicago's first Chief Equity Officer. And it is my pleasure to welcome tonight's guests. But first, I want to take a quick minute to share a few words about an initiative that is near and dear to my heart. Together We Heal. It's an initiative aimed at building racial healing and transformation in Chicago. This year, we've declared 2022 our year of healing with a focus on 3 pillars. Reflect on our past. This includes educating, engaging about past and present racial injustices and structures of racial inequality. Reclaim our present. This includes identifying lessons learned from the past to inform new values and norms that shift power, and reimagine our future. This is where we envision a more inclusive future state and design policies to produce and sustain more equitable outcomes. Chicago Public Library's Voices for Justice allows us to use the power of writing and discussion to explore all 3 pillars with our neighbors across Chicago. When I think about the work of tonight's author, Chicago's own Margo Jefferson, both the pillars of reflect on our past and reclaim our present stand out to me. I'm in awe of her talent to have audiences contend with history, culture, and art as we are all experiencing an ever-changing and evolving world. In her own words, she has said, the world is full of changes, of negotiations, changes of positions, seeing things one way, then another, gauging responses, status changes that can all happen in an instant. Margo is the winner of a Pulitzer Prize for Criticism and has previously served as the book and arts critic for Newsweek and the New York Times. Her writing has appeared in numerous publications such as Vogue, New York Magazine, and The Nation. Her memoir, Negroland, received the National Book Critics Circle Award for autobiography. She's also the author of On Michael Jackson and is a professor of writing at Columbia University School of Art. Her latest book is entitled Constructing a Nervous System, a Memoir. She will be in conversation with Donna Seaman. Donna Seaman is the editor for the adult book section in Booklist, published by the American Library Association. She is also a recipient of the Louis Shores Award for Excellence in Book Reviewing, the James Friend Memorial Award for Literary Criticism, and the Studs Terkel Humanities Service Award. Please join me in welcoming both Margo and Donna to the CPL virtual stage.
Thank you so much, Candace.
Thank you very much.
Margo, it's such a joy to be here with you. I want to add a congratulations to your introduction for the Windham Campbell Prize.
Thank you.
Very prestigious award that you just received. So I was very excited for you about that. And I loved in their citation that they said, in both your short criticism and your longer works, Jefferson displays a storyteller's grace, the power to transform any subject, no matter how difficult or diffuse, into a cohesive, compelling narrative. Yeah.
I'm overwhelmed with praises.
And there's more. There's more. So I thought this is such an unusual, beautiful book. I thought perhaps if you'd read a little of the opening to give our audience a sense of its voice and texture. Because I'm going to ask you a lot of questions about how it was written.
Great, with pleasure.
Thank you.
So bear in mind that this is a second, not a first memoir. So one is always looking again, whether we're just sitting with people we love, reminiscing, or whether you're writing, you're always looking again for what even the same facts mean, how you can tell them and look at your life in fresh ways. So here we go. Well, it's time for spectacles. I stood in the bright, harsh light. The stage was bare. I extended my arm, no, flung, hurled it out, pointed an accusatory finger, then turned to an unseen audience and declared, "This is the woman with only one childhood." It was part of the night's dream work, and I was rattled when I woke up, for I'd been addressing myself. My tone was harsh. My outstretched arm with that accusing finger had the force of that moment in melodrama when the villain, hitherto unsuccessful in his scheme to maim and ruin the heroine's life, when the villain is revealed, condemned, and readied for punishment. I understood what I had to do. At the end of his stage shows, Bill Bojangles Robinson would look up at the lighting booth and shout, "Give me a light, my color." Pause, then blackout. When the light returned, I knew it was time to construct another nervous system. For most of my adult life, I'd felt that to become a person of complex and stirring character, a person of inner consequence, as I put it, I must break myself into pieces, hammer, saw, chisel away at the unworthy parts, then rebuild. It was laborious, like stonemasonry. And on the stonemasonry model, the human self said, "Go on," admires itself for saying, "Go on," and proceeds to go on. As I went on, I grew dissatisfied. The edifice was too fixed. I wanted it to become an apparatus of moving parts, parts that fuse, burn, fracture, cluster, hurtle, and drift. I wanted to hear its continuous thrum. Thrum go the materials of my life, chosen, imposed, inherited, made up. I imagined it as a nervous system, but not our standard biological one. It was an assemblage. My nervous system is my structure of recombinant thoughts, memories, feelings, sensations, and words. I write criticism, I write memoir. What will be my tactics, strategies, instruments for constructing this nervous system? There's no escaping the primal stuff of memory and experience. Dramatize it, analyze it, amend it accidentally, and remake it intentionally. Call it temperamental autobiography. Remember, memoir is your present, negotiating with versions of your past for a future you're willing to show up in.
Thank you so much. That was beautiful and exciting. And it leads me to my first question. So I was very struck by things you've said about criticism. It's an interesting form, an interesting practice.
As you well know, yes.
Yes, exactly. And we share a lot of the feelings about it being, you describe it as being a bit of a parasite in a benign way.
Yeah.
But you, Margo, practice criticism in a profoundly inquisitive and very imaginative mode. So I wonder, how do you define criticism, and why do you think it matters to people?
Well, definitions.
Yes, of
I
course.
would say it is a combination of elements. You are for one thing, a person, passionately involved in studying, thinking about, daydreaming about whatever the art form, whatever the subject is, anything. At the same time, you are supposed to live and bring this experience to people, as one of them. You're an audience member, so you're both a kind of scholar, of the thing, but also a fan and a spectator, asking questions and not sure that she'll be able to come up with answers. You are using all your senses. You are a mind and a sensibility. You're using taste, smell, sound, everything, sight, to relive the experience for yourself and try to bring it to life for your audience. So you're reliving it through your prose. And at the same time, you are making an assessment of it. You might call it a judgment, yes, but it doesn't have to be, this is good or this is bad. It might be, this is interesting, this is contradictory, this is very challenging for me and for you. This may feel a little ahead of all of us. So let me try to give you some materials with which to think about it. So you're an interpreter, you're a describer, recreating sense memories, and you're a student. I said scholar, but I would say student all the time.
Yes, that's so it is. It's lifelong learning for sure. And I love that you talk about the senses. You're very much present in your work. And I was thinking in Negro Land, you talk about your childhood a lot and you revisit some of that in your new book too. So I was wondering if your own experiences on the stage and playing the piano helped you kind of inhabit the world of other artists.
Well, allowing for the fact that, I was definitely an amateur. Yes, I would even say, as someone whose niece and sister the sister was very involved with dance, even as a not particularly gifted dance student, the going at it, the having to take in, with every pore, the craft, with having to put your body and your mind and all your instincts into it, at least for a time, that gives you, I do think, a kind of sympathy and a kind of almost physical as well as emotional empathy, I would even say.
Yeah, so that's very well put.
And it also helps you, if you did something, I loved acting and I liked and sometimes loved piano. If you did something in whatever way, a certain passion for it stays inside you and it can become nostalgic. And you try to turn that passion and nostalgia into, living prose.
Yes. And also, I think it makes you more sympathetic to how difficult things are for artists. So
I wish, sometimes you're not as sympathetic, don't you find, as you wish you had been. But, I do remember at one point when I was doing theater criticism, I was doing books, then I did theater, then I did both. I just thought, I'm seeing a lot of things that I don't feel enthusiastic about, and it's making me really sour. I need to somehow reconnect with theater experience. And I joined a friend's acting group and we would meet and do scenes, every few weeks. And it was great for me. It just, gave me a shot of benevolent adrenaline again, and I remembered, okay, yeah. And I could kind of live through it with an actor. Yeah.
Yes, I think that's really crucial for a critic because it's very easy to step back and just be negative, dismissive, perhaps.
Yes, it can even be kind of fun, It's like actors often say that playing anger is one of the easiest, but also, one of the kickiest things to do.
Exactly.
Same thing with writing, right? Yeah.
Yes.
So you gotta decide when the beast is useful and it needs to go back and do its lair. Yeah.
Right. And if it's too easy, you need to be suspicious because you might be missing something.
That's right. It can also really be hard to find vibrant words when you love something. Look at the words that's just great. That's incredible. So, it can be harder in terms of language.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. When you really love something.
Yeah.
Then you really struggle. So, another thing that interests me, because I think, you were just sort of born to do what you do. So I was curious, when did you start keeping journals or diaries? When did you first start doing that?
I've been very on again, off again about that. I did it a, everybody keeps some kind of diary in high school, right?
Yes, don't we?
Just like you're always playing with your handwriting and the spelling of your name. But I don't think, I didn't, not much in college. I don't think I really started keeping journals that were a combination of, all right, this is what I'm feeling, and let me try out, I'll try out a little writing idea here, or, just put this memory or this experience in a form that might be useful to me later. I don't think I did that till I got to journalism school. That was in 1970, 71. So it was partly just the taking of notes, ideas for stories that sent me back into really writing journals, because, you have to keep a kind of record of what your sensibility and your temperament are doing. But like I said, I'm off again, on again with it, but something. That's what I love doing, and which I'm even more which I'm more faithful about, is I love writing down quotes from all kinds of places, clipping them out of news, and then putting them in some kind of notebook, set of pages. Again, I guess an assemblage in a way, yeah. And then seeing what these different quotes say to each other, yeah.
Aha. See, that's what I was getting at, because I was so impressed that you have, and I can tell that you have these at your fingertips in some way. The book
I started digging through at a certain point. Yeah.
You had your own kind of a commonplace book, or a
yes, that's exactly it. My own commonplace book, contemplative commonplace book.
Lovely, lovely. What a tremendous resource, because you're able to, the whole book is an assemblage in very intriguing ways. And you're able to draw on, your sort of deep immersions in different artists' lives and their work, and put them together in very interesting juxtapositions. So I thought that was a long practice of yours to keep track of it.
Yeah, it was. And it has turned out not only to continually over the years entertain me or stimulate me. For this book, I found it especially generative, because I really wanted lots of diverse, contradictory, even clashing or dialoguing art forms, artists. I wanted going across race, class, gender lines. I wanted them to cohabit. I didn't want, here's this clash, here's this opposition. I wanted, to keep these differences and these distinctions, and sometimes these clashes, alive and mobile and flexible.
Yes, and you do that. You address yourself in the narrative.
I do, yes.
Give yourself instructions. You address us. Pay attention.
I get a little bossy sometimes.
A little bossy in a good way. So this is a very creative approach to memoir, as your first memoir was too. You kind of we get some personal stories, some anecdote, we see you, but you always open to the wider world. You reach back into history, and you sort of channel these other creative people in such vivid, poignant ways, especially in this book. A little list. We have Ella Fitzgerald.
Wonderful Ella, yes.
Oh my God. And you relate to her in a very physical way. You remember watching her on television as a girl.
Yeah, when I was quite young, and there's the gorgeous Ella that you hear on records, all those LPs my parents had. Then I would see her on TV, and of course I was this young child, young girl, yearning, for glamour and beauty. And there would be this, very pleasant looking, nicely dressed, but stocky, not glamorous in the movie star or chanteuse way. And I thought, oh dear, it bothered me. It almost embarrassed me. In addition to that, this will seem so antiquated to younger people in the audience. Sweating in public, if you were bourgeois or in any way, was considered for a woman vulgar.
Yeah.
which is another reason that, women had such conflicting emotions about sports and athletic. But, there was even the genteel middle-class word for sweat was perspiration. But, Ella Fitzgerald worked so hard and sang so hard, in those concerts, especially, just with those musicians. Sometimes you could just see them with looks of wonderment, like, how am I keeping up with her? She sweated, just like Louis Armstrong, who we all remember with the white handkerchief. And it took me, it felt like a breach of manners, a breach of that protocol, that self-protective so-called perfectionism that, as a young middle-class Black girl about to become a young middle-class Black woman, I felt was essential. It took me, much longer. It took me the women's movement. It took me all sorts of things, and watching her tapes over and over, and breaking through these codes to kind of fall in love with her entire self, and then to discover much more about her life. We always thought, oh, Ella, she's so sweet, she's so lovely. Billie Holiday is the one who really suffered. Ella suffered plenty. She was an orphan. She went to reform school. She ran away, got herself, on the stage of the Savoy Ballroom at about 18, and then just kept at it till she died. She just never shared it.
Yeah.
So, the secret life of Ella Fitzgerald also gave me access to, a richer, fuller appreciation of what she could do, and of the beauty and comfort that, she chose in many ways to offer us a kind of lyric gorgeousness, as opposed to tragedy.
And all that, by the way, to tell our audience, is in the book. I mean, you tell the story, you write about it so captivatingly and powerfully. And you do that with each of the artists that you channel. It's an amazing amalgam of memoir, criticism, and biography.
That's what I was trying for. And I wanted the memoir parts to connect up to, to a cultural context, to be part of a cultural context that had to do with, with race, with class, with temperament, with generational differences. And I wanted the so-called criticism, the writing about artists, to feel as intimate and essential as our writing about, our deepest, closest memories do. Because this is the stuff, we critics, we're messing with the stuff of our and everybody else's personal culture. It's the culture at large, but it's also, who do you love? Who have you been obsessed with all your lives? And that's what we're entangled with, all these particular needs, desires, and irrational, often passions. We often make them more rational than they are, right?
Right. Well, and it's so fascinating too that so much of what you touch on in your personal experiences and your experiences of art have to do with expectations for gender, for race.
Absolutely.
I was brought up similarly, like you have to be a lady, and we're Jewish in a not particularly Jewish place, so you
have to perform well for your people, so that no stereotype. You won't be responsible for anybody
letting anything
to be bigoted or
you don't, no sweating, no rumpled clothes. I mean, everything had to be just
perfect diction, all that stuff.
Stand up straight, fights over hair, all that. I understood it as armor. I really did.
That's exactly right. It was armor.
But then, you grow up and you become more of your own self, and you write about this so strongly, and that generational divide, both about gender and race and ethnicity, it really changes.
Very much so. Well, they're in terms of chronology, in terms of history, I entered high school in 1960. I entered college in 1964. So, between those years, we had, by 1970, we had Bohemian, let's start it in the late 50s, maybe with Bach and Bohemianism. But also pacifism and anti-war. You had the anti-war movement coming. You had civil rights, which then mutated into and joined with, sometimes clashed with, Black Power. You had the women's movement. By the 70s, you had other, minority group movements, ethnic studies, and you had queer studies. So, and I say studies now because, when you're a writer or a scholar, they are taking root, in schools and in the academy. But these were movements, and they marked all of us. They were part of our lives, and they changed you. You were all there changing together.
Deeply, and changed art, of course, and culture. And yes. And so, I mean, the shocking thing about being around for a while as a person is to see the backlash, to see things that we thought were achieved becoming undone.
And to see this build up of rage and hatred that's been
the resentment
boiling. And I didn't think of myself as naive. Say when Obama was elected, I didn't say, oh, well, we're post-race.
We're done.
But nevertheless, this stuff got so ugly, so aggressively and almost joyously ugly. There's a kind of pleasure that these right-wingers and politicians and, cultural, let's clean it up, let's have cultural aggressors have. Canon, we need a lot of straight white men. That's what you need to be reading. Whoa, they're having the time of their lives, and they're also claiming they've been victims.
Yes. Yeah. So it's in this book you talk about, there's a line where you say that for a lifetime of reading, you've often been very disappointed by white writers. You sort of spend a lot of time with Willa Cather, which is absolutely fascinating to me, similar to the Ella Fitzgerald, like a whole new perspective. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, and what I meant was, and what I was doing with Cather was isolating, almost the way a scientist might in a laboratory, isolating in a sense, the poison, which did not inform the whole book, but informed central parts of it. The poison of an obsession, a fascination, an exaltation of the aesthetic of whiteness, of blonde hair, of white skin, of European culture. Basically, in the book that I write about, Song of the Lark, the only real cultural landscape of America, and that book is very much about an America at the turn of the 20th century, finding a language with which to create its own American art. But the only people she admires and respects on that landscape are white Europeans. One exception, Native Americans, a particular tribe that made great art, but they're gone by the time, basically by the time she writes about them. So in that way, it's almost like writing about medieval art. You can love it, but hello, they're dead. So that's, I wanted to confront, because The Song of the Lark was a book I had taught and loved much of. And I realized I had not, I separated and criticized, kind of, in a sneaky little nasty whisper, the racial limits and even aggressions. And I thought, no, I have to take them on, take them up, and incorporate them into my involvement, some of which remains, because it is in part the portrait of a young Midwestern girl becoming an artist. So some of which I still connect with. I have to put these things together in this laboratory experiment and see what comes out. I'd call it at one point, I'll jump metaphors, I call it a procedural, so I'm trying to collect all the evidence to give a full, unsentimental portrait and judgment of this fascinating and flawed work.
Right. I love that
Which is what I meant when I say in the book, yeah, it isn't the first time that I've been reading hardly the first time, a white writer with whom I'm very smitten, and then suddenly you come up against, this racial folly or abomination or carelessness, and then you reset. So I thought, well, let's think about coming up against it and resetting. Let me, try to really find a method, make this a methodology.
It's revealing in so many ways, and it shows you that even a great artist is sort of a victim of their circumstances in a lot of ways. It's really hard to see beyond.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is something we're having to think more and more about, not only in literature, but in every part of our culture. Performers. I mean, for God's sake, I wrote a book about Michael Jackson. I had to think about that. But it comes up constantly. There's these debates about so-called cancel culture. That's all part of it. So we have to just expand and sharpen our thinking and our encounters with all of this stuff.
Absolutely. And that, that's a profound mission, and not, I think not practice often enough. And when you come to it, it's, it can be as moving as poetry, and as kind of as mysterious.
That's really nice. I like that. Yeah. As moving as poetry.
Yes.
Mysterious. Yes.
Similar surprises, and I'm thinking of those sort of juxtapositions and clashes, which and this kind of exploratory writing has that same dynamic.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
Yeah. So I'll throw some more names out at you because it's fun. So you write beautifully, and again, I've read myself also a lot about these people, but I felt your perspective was just so vital and revealing. So it's Josephine Baker I'm thinking about that, and she has always fascinated me, along with so many other people, and the fact that she left the US to become herself in Paris and France, and had a whole new existence there as war hero and many other things. But I wonder if you could talk a little bit about writing about her and what you felt you discovered that was new for you.
As you say, she's an icon of, kind of hybrid fascinations, this young East St. Louis, working class little Black girl who joins Black vaudeville and, dresses as a dresser for Clara Smith, the great blues singer, makes her way to New York, enters. So even before she goes to Paris, she's moving through all these worlds. She leaves the world of blues and vaudeville behind in New York and enters Black musical theater, on Black Broadway, Cecil and Blake. So she's, already negotiating herself, and then gets herself or is discovered. She's a dancer, she's a singer, and she's a comedian. And she even wears blackface sometimes. So, Josephine will do what's needed. She is discovered and joins a troupe of Black performers going to Paris for something called the Black Review, La Revue Nègre. She's supposed to dance, she's supposed to sing, she becomes and she is a wonderful dancer. She's a kind of great improvisatory dancer, the way the jazz musicians of that period, this is the 20s, were. And she is shameless and fearless. She wears, you and I were talking about, the anxieties of being proper. She wore this skirt of phallic banana, which certainly signal, a kind of primitivism. She was so gifted in kinetic that, if you saw her, you just knew she was moving beyond all of that. She sang in charming French, but there were also recordings of her singing Fats Waller songs like song. So she became multilingual as a performer, as this theatrical human being that she was, who could serve, in the underground, free French, during World War II, could then decide she was going to be the great mother, the great mother and uniter of children of all nations, and proceeded to adopt, I'm forgetting how many children, maybe, 12, 13, was systematically, when she came back to the United States, on her visits in the 30s, the 50s, she would always take a civil rights stand, whether it was about being, not being allowed into a fancy club or desegregating a theater. She was, whether it was banana skirts or going up against, the FBI, which kept a big file on her, she was fearless. And she was imaginative always in these modes. It was astonishing to me. She has the force when you're young and reading mythology. She has the force of one of these gods or goddesses. I will do what I want. I will be a savior. If I have to do a little harm, if I have to punish my enemies, I will do that. And she was the only woman permitted to speak at the 1963 March on Washington, Martin Luther King's march, and she arrived, because it was a march. So yes, we talk about I have the dream, but it was also militant. It knew and it signaled that battles lay ahead. She appeared in her army uniform, the Free French army uniform, and that's what she wore when she spoke and hailed. I'm with you. I've been doing this a long time, and I'm with you. I'll pass it on to you now, she said.
Such a warrior.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Seducer, a warrior, a glamour, a diva. How could you? I mean, it's astonishing.
Right.
Yeah.
Always, yes, and with such wit and a lot of, this is truly a wonderful story.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have Josephine Baker, and then I'm gonna throw one other name out to you because I found this so hilarious. That would be Bing Crosby. Now, I mean, really.
This is, I think I said much earlier, many of the figures or movies, TV shows, whatever, we attach to. We can't justify it rationally. Now, I could say to you, Bing Crosby was an important American singer, which he was. And in his early days, actually, he adored Louis Armstrong and Ethel Waters, and he wanted to be a jazz singer. He became this larger than life kind of oleaginous father, benign father, white father. He'll play a priest, he'll play a joker, but always he's somewhat benevolent, though a little sardonic, and always in control. And everything is at his bequest. All powerful in this kind of everyday mass media way. And I got kind of fascinated with the utter access to power and to contentment. And I think I say, I'm Bing Crosby. I take on his voice. I can do anything I want. I'm entitled to everything I want. And I found that fascinating. So I decided, let me do an impersonation. Bing Crosby, let me invert the power dynamic of the minstrel show, where you have, let's say, a Black or white performer in blackface doing kind of grotesque, extreme, imitations, associations with what is supposedly Black behavior, Black comedy, Black ignorance, and you're having a wonderful time. I'm inverting it. I'm taking Bing Crosby and I'm making him my minstrel, and I'm going to live out these forbidden urges. I can do anything I want. I can be as selfish as I want, and you'll always continue to think I'm charming. That's what I'm going to do, right? You've done it to my people. I'll do it to yours. And I had a ball. It was fun. It was also a form of impersonation. Yeah.
Great turn. I mean, it's very mischievous and quite brilliant, and such a turnaround. I mean,
that's what I wanted, because I'd spent a long time over these years kind of just, in show business researches with the minstrel show, and this kind of enforced, really often on Black people in particular, who are wildly talented, kind of grotesque performance of I talk any way I want, of a kind of physically gifted ignorance. I would say that's what, Black people can do. They can act out, act up. They can use their limbs and voices in funny and wonderful ways. And I envy that, but I also have to make fun of them. That compensates for my being envious. So I guess I did the same thing with Bing Crosby. That's right. Don't want to be him, but wanted to play with his power.
Power.
Yeah.
And that's the thing about power, is the people that have it don't realize that someone like yourself can see them, that you're onto them.
Yeah, but you don't need, if you have enough power, you don't need to think about who's on to you, because they don't matter. They can't get to you. Plus, as we both know, you've been raised, brought up, taught to think really only of yourself and people like you. So it isn't in your range.
Yes, that's very interesting. Except I guess I would say that if you grow up reading the way you did, the way I did, I think if you read receptively and attentively, you do start realizing that you're not the center of the universe.
Yes, I think that's right. There were ways in which, as a privileged Black person, I was taught, here's the universe and it's complicated and it's fraught, but you are, you're at the center of the Black universe, you're holding it forward. And, one had to, and thank God for history and sociology and growing up when I did these movements, these challenges, these upendings of, or at least strikes out at hierarchies to be taken for granted. You had to examine yourself. You had. That's partly what I mean in the portion I read when I said, you have to take yourself apart, and then you reconstruct with different tools.
Yes. I do. Yes, and I think that awareness of the self and one's limitations is
limitations. You're so right. Yeah.
Yes, and I mean, personally, I think because I lived in a very secure middle class white place, and yet I knew. I mean, we have peril in your heritage, so things are not the way they appear, and even the difference in generations, the way my parents had to grow up compared to the way I grew up. Yeah. I understood everything was kind of a facade and vulnerable at all times.
Yeah, vulnerable at all times. That's it. Yeah.
And when you read widely and you read fiction, I mean, you read Dickens, you read, whatever you start reading as a young person, and, you just start realizing a lot about power and character and pushing back, resistance, I guess I would say.
I think that's right. And that old phrase from the 60s, self-criticism, self-inquiry, and so on.
Yes. Self-inquiry, that's right. Yeah, so for you, you've applied your critiquing to your own self, really at each stage, and that you're still able to go back and learn new things from your previous selves, I believe.
I'm still able to try. Yeah, sometimes it really works, and then some, okay, gonna have to come back at that another way, a little further down the road.
I admire your intensity on that front. I wish more people would do that.
It's also true that we writers are always on the prowl for material.
Yeah.
Part of your material is yourself, and it's like any other craft or art, you have to use your techniques. You have to keep expanding your range.
That's right. That's how you stay fresh.
Yeah.
There's a sentence in your book I was very struck by, very important. Women's anger needs to be honored and celebrated and protected. And this is within an amazing discussion about virginity, how that used to be held up as this is what women are.
That's right. Yes, I've been talking for various reasons about virginity and how it's so prized, and how various women from Harriet Jacobs to Marianne Moore are kind of trying to subvert it. And then I move on to, all right, I'll tell you something we need to prize. Let's talk about, styles of, modes of, virtuosos of women's anger, because we need to honor that a lot more, and we need to be encouraged to practice it a lot more. So, it's kind of a chronicle of models, starting with soul and pop singers and actresses, and then, moving through Nina Simone, and then, there's my sister, the dancer, with Martha Graham.
I love that story. That was hilarious.
It wasn't that, yeah.
But yeah, so Martha Graham, of course, embodied women's anger and
yes,
ferocity.
And my sister was involved with Hollywood Betty Davis, and then I get involved with Black Betty Davis, who taught Miles Davis a few things. So it's really a kind of chronicle of and homage to virtuosic and practitioners of women's anger.
Yes, indeed. And continually undervalued. I mean, even there's so many movements that still sort of left women to the side. So you have to keep talking about that. Yeah. And I guess I'm not sure, we'll see if we have audience questions, but I want to mention that you end with a tribute to your grandmothers, which I found very, very moving and circular. It was a really nice way to come back around.
Yeah, it is a tribute. It's also a kind of acknowledging that their legacy can be burdensome. It's larger than life, and it can be overpowering. And yet it does end with this absolute connection. Like the parting line, the closing line is my grandmother's.
Yeah, that's strength, that's survival. So yes, it's always like that. You need to liberate yourself, but also draw on that deep well of strength that you inherit. Yeah. I see Jenny.
Yes, we do have some questions from the audience, so we'll get to a few of those. The first one is, you speak so wonderfully about the impact artists, musicians, actors can have on culture and individuals. Why do you think that artists can push topics of social justice in a way that sometimes politicians, church leaders, or others are not as successful at bringing up those topics?
I think because artists are accustomed to, trained to use their imaginations, to frame and to insert themselves into these issues so that they become visceral. They don't stay issues, they become emotions, they become drives, they become needs. Artists have these techniques to, in fact, make issues into complex, challenging, questions, matters that matter as much as that we care about as much as looking at the art they do. It's the imaginative power they have. Yeah.
Someone else asks, I was struck by your talk on keeping a journal and writing. How do you get in or keep the habit of writing?
Repeat. You check out what your own, physical and, mental habits are. Do you write better? When is your energy highest? Do you do better in the morning? Do you do better in the afternoon? Test that out and then settle in. How many hours can you do it? If you can't write more than several hours, can you then do some research, or some note taking, or some, in that way, keeping a journal can, just kind of free the mind and ease the tension. So, what can you do that keeps you connected to it? When do you need breaks? It's you map it out. with and for yourself. Habit is crucial.
Take a walk to the library, do some research, right?
There we go. Exactly. Take a walk to the library and just, if a book, something came to your mind while you were doing your own writing, pull it out and read it, associative. It's always useful.
Someone else says, you talk about so many of the women, musicians, and artists you admired. Who do you think is admirable today, especially for taking on social justice issues?
Oh, there are so many. I don't know where I would begin. Do they mean artists who are admirable?
I think anybody from pop culture.
Yeah, pop culture.
Well, would we consider I've just blocked out his name and I like him so much. Kamau Bell. He's an interesting blend of, of kind of school culture, scholar culture, and pop culture. Everything he does, is it picks at it, pushes it, it advances. Someone like Beyonce, the way her videos really did change and get complicated over the years. And the way she made all those social and political complications glamorous. That was very clever. Very, very smart. Yeah.
And you wonder what some of the people who you read about in your book would think of some of the artists of today, right?
You do wonder, yeah. And there are so many good artists today, yeah. Women, minorities of all kinds, yeah. Longer list, but I'll let it go for now, yeah. I'd love to know who the questioner particularly admires.
Thinking of, yeah.
Hey, yeah, put it in the chat. Yeah. Someone else is asking, what books are you reading right now? Oh, that's always a good question to ask a writer. What books are you reading?
Well, I'm actually doing a little back history work on my parents' and grandparents' generation. My mother's family came from, my mother and father's family both came from Mississippi. Then mother's family came to St. Louis, and daddy's family went to California. So I'm actually now reading a very striking history of St. Louis by Walter Johnson. He's an historian. Let me give you the exact title because it's a little bit long. The Broken Heart of America, St. Louis, and the Violent History of the U.S. So that's interesting. And I've got a bunch of Chicago books that I'm, the Chicago Black Renaissance and activist women, the Chicago Black Renaissance. I'm rereading Richard Wright's introduction to Black Metropolis. City history is still in some right now on my mind. I was also I've been teaching a lot of kind of experimental essays and experimental arts writing in the fall. So now I'm kind of digging into history. There's always a poet knocking around. I get a lot of new volumes of poetry, so that's good to have. And also, I often will just leaf through, there's a very nice art photography magazine called Aperture, for example. So I will look through old issues of that, or pull out. The other day I pulled out some huge catalog from a William Blake exhibit that I'd had. Yeah, just, my imagination needed to go somewhere. So I did that. Which again, is a good thing for one as a writer, just whatever your little instincts or for whether it's watching a TV show or digging up a book, follow it.
See where it's so great about the imagination, the power of the imagination. That's so important.
Yeah, and artists, they bring techniques, all that everyday stuff, scales and journals and taking a bar. It's all part of keeping the, firing up, training, shaping the imagination.
I think we have one last question, which is always I always have a viewer who always watches this, ask this question. What are you working on now and what's next?
Well, I'm clearly thinking about, doing more like solid family history research. I am also actually putting together, this is not glamorous, but I want to do it, a collection of my pieces over the years of my writing. And I am talking with an old friend, also a very good writer, but I'm not going to say a lot more, about possibly doing a book together. We're of the same generation. We're both women. She's white, I'm Black. So we might track certain social and personal and whatever our lives through, and also kind of examine what do interracial friendships and bonds require? What do they, what do they need? A little bit like, like in bringing to that the kinds of examinations, and hopefully we'll both bring arts to it that I'm trying to look at in this book. What's a trade-off? What's a negotiation? Where do the minds meet? Yeah. What are the materials of interracial friendships? And what are the materials for my generation of women of friendship?
That's great. Well, you'll have to come back after you.
Yeah.
Happily. That was my bid for an invitation.
You're welcome anytime. Well, thank you so much, Margo.
Yes, thank you, Margo. It was a wonderful conversation.
It's wonderful. I'm so glad we really got to talk. And thank you for inviting me. Thank you, Jennifer.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks
to you both.
Thank you, Jennifer.
So thanks so much to Margo and Donna for this wonderful discussion tonight. We want to also thank Candace Moore for her support of Voices for Justice series at CPL. And thanks also to CPL techs and staff working tonight as well. Tonight's event is possible because of the generous support of the Chicago Public Library Foundation. To learn more about their work and how you can get involved, visit cplfoundation.org. Don't forget to visit your local Chicago Public Library branch and check out Margo's new book, Constructing a Nervous System. Tonight's event will be available for on-demand viewing on the CPL YouTube and Facebook channels immediately following. So please tell a friend who missed it. And visit shypublive.org for more information on upcoming events. Have a great night, everyone.